In house, coming in hot, MK. It is Thursday, August 27th. MK, we are at the tail end of August. It is flying by. We are supposed to report to work next week without students. How are we feeling about that, my friend?
Absolutely terrified. every type of emotion possible for next week. I know. I'm happy to go back. I'm happy to see you guys. You know, the art department. Happy to see all the other teachers in the building.
If we're going to be allowed to see everybody, we don't even know how that's going to work.
I'm sure we will. I'm happy about that. I'm happy to see everybody. I'm looking forward to seeing the students, although it's going to be different. But yeah, have no idea what we're going to be doing, how we're going to go about doing what we're going to be doing. So that's it. That's the terrifying part. And you know,
it's been this never-ending question. Every episode, I feel like we cover this in the beginning, like, what the hell are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
I feel like it's more of a question about how we're going to go about doing it now than it was when this all came down in March when we were trying to figure out how to teach from home. I think that the fact that we have to do both in person and online now, I don't think anybody knows how we're going to do it yet.
Yeah.
And there's no time to test it out, really. So it's going to be a mess.
For sure. Well, news in our house this week, as those of you who have been following since the pandemic know that the Sena house has been struggling with appliances this entire pandemic. First, we had to get the new washer and dryer back in the spring, and then there was the air conditioner and the oven that had to get purchased. And then within the last month, there was a whole thing with the hot water heater. So I have not had a hot shower more than 2.5 minutes long for about a month and a half until this week, MK. We finally got the system put in. Well,
it's a good thing that you shower over the summer, because since we went on home instruction in the summer, I forget how often I shower. It's horrible. It's like, oh, what was it, this week, last week? But at least you're paying attention to that. Now you can with hot water.
Yes, this past about 4 days ago, I took literally a 25-minute hot shower for the first time in like a month and a half, and it was life-changing. It really was. But now, of course, one door closes and another door opens, and we have no phone line, no landline system. It's one thing after another. I think I have the sneaking suspicion that the guys who came to put in my hot water somehow screwed something up and clipped the phone line.
Yeah. I said you're like the last person to use the landline.
I know, and
we've had it for years, and then I have it's just it's always telemarketers. That's it. So we
were just talking about it. Yeah, before the program, it's ridiculous how it's cheaper to have this 3-system thing with the cable company, the cable, the internet, and the phone. It's actually cheaper to have all 3. We've tried to drop the phone, and they want like $50 more a month for dropping less service.
Because that's what they get for selling your number to telemarketers. That's why they got to make
exactly. So now, of course, on the computer today for over an hour with customer service. So credit to Altice Cablevision. At least they are consistent with crappy customer service, whether it's on the phone or online. They suck no matter what. So at least they're consistent. But of course, the earliest they can come is next Wednesday, which is the first day back to work.
Of course.
So now I'm going to have to worry about rushing back and being home by a certain time for the window, that 3-hour window they gave me if they ever show up.
3-hour window. Yeah.
So who knows? It's just like I can't wrap my head this summer around everything, including the bigger crap that keeps going on. The artist that we're talking to today, fantastic individual who's very socially active on social media, talking about injustices and really pushing, all kinds of great messages about how we gotta cut the crap and get along and figure things out. And we're going to get to talk to him today about, how he feels about so many different issues and how being creative has helped him through and getting through so many different things. And so we are excited today on a Thursday, which is also new for us.
Yeah, Thursday. I was completely forgot about that.
I know, that just threw me off.
Yesterday, you're keep going tomorrow. I'm like, oh, he's making a mistake. It's actually Friday, but then.
I know. It's just like, it's one other thing to wrap our heads around, but we are more than excited to have our friend Anthony Hurd on
Absolutely.
the program today from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Anthony, welcome, my friend. How are we doing?
Hello. Doing good. How are you doing?
Good. We are good. We're hanging in there. How are things, first off, out on the west? Actually, you're southwest. So how are things as far as what's going on with this pandemic? How are things still shaping up out there for you?
Albuquerque's not bad. Our numbers have been good from the beginning. We're still like in the, it's still horrible, but we're still in the hundreds when it comes to deaths. Unfortunately, a huge part of what's happening in New Mexico is on the reservations. So they're just on lockdown right now. They're disconnected from everybody. Anything on reservation land is closed off to anybody outside of the reservation. So
wow.
And now, are they self-sustaining normally under regular conditions, or do they rely a lot on everything around in the state?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it's probably based in tourism, right. But, you know, we fucked them over like we did every other people that we came in and demolished their lands and took everything. Right. So they're struggling for sure.
Yeah. But you had mentioned on the pre-check when we talked to you that you guys went into a lockdown mode fairly early on too, and that, you know, you guys are you still seeing that in place, like, or are things starting to lift a little bit more and, you know, coming back to normal?
There's restaurants that are open. Like we had friends that were moving to Vegas from Texas that came through town on Monday, and we had dinner at a restaurant, like out on a patio with masks, sitting far away from each other. That was the first time I've been in a restaurant since the beginning of March. And if there was another alternative, then I probably would have taken it. But I like skipped on eating McDonald's in our car, sitting next to each other, like, grab burgers. And
we had the same thing. We were out away last week. We ate out at a restaurant, and they had, before we even sat down at the table, they took everybody's name, everybody's address for contact tracing, just in case somebody across from us ended up testing positive. I guess they would let us know. It was crazy.
The way of the new world, apparently.
Do that,
it's coming. It's coming because they're doing it here now, which is crazy. Yeah, it's not crazy. It's good to trace, but it was definitely a new experience.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a good idea. I mean, here, I don't wear my mask when I'm walking my dog in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
as long as there's no people around. But like as soon as I hit a main street, I put my mask on. Go to the park, put your mask on. But for the most part, people have been pretty good out here. I mean, there's always a few idiots.
Of course.
We see that.
That's life.
That one lady with her nose under the mat on top.
You see that all the time.
You see that. That happens out here too. Yeah.
It's usually my kids. I'm like, get that thing over your nose.
We can't get masks that fit Beth because, like, I don't know, she has a tiny head. But then just falls off her face. So
that's a big issue. And going back to school, I think that's going to be one of the biggest issues too, especially at the elementary level, is getting these kids who are in person to continue to keep them on. You know, that's kind of crazy. So Albuquerque, New Mexico, but originally from Missouri, correct, Anthony? Or grew up in Missouri?
I grew up in Kansas City.
Kansas City. So if you could take us to, you know, what's it like growing up and in Missouri, at what point does art become this part of who you are, and how does it dictate where it goes forward? I know that in the pre-check you said skateboarding was a huge influence for you too growing up in Missouri. So why don't you just take us through that a little bit?
Well, like art, it's funny because I was in advertising for like 20 years, and I always related this back to like when I was like 6 or 7, because we'd have like drawing contests or, you know, little things in the school, and the winner gets to go to a pizza party or some shit. So I was like, I'm good at this. Like I can color that within the lines and do little gradients and win a pizza party. So it just instantly became like my thing. Like I can do this. So for the longest time, I guess the longest time, I guess probably 2nd to 5th grade, it was just like, how do I win stuff? How do I get out of school? The things that I can do.
Why'd you get into art? Pizza and getting out of school.
Yeah. Like in 4th grade, I won some contest, and it was like you got the whole day. Like you got to go to a pizza party with other kids from other schools who won, and it's like, pizza and out of school. That's pretty good motivation.
Yeah.
But then when I was 10, I started skateboarding. So that was like 5th grade. And that's when I first, like my very first board was a Vision Mark Gonzalez. And it was just like very flat, hard line graphics. And in the day, like everybody was skating then. This is like the 80s, mid 80s, right. 85. There was just like this big insurance and big deal. Everybody skated, every kid, every teenager. And a couple of years later, that all just died off, and it stuck with me. I was like the only kid left on the street that still skated. But a lot of that was because of everything it introduced me to. Like musically and artistically, everything became filtered through skateboarding. And I still, to this day, I probably follow more skateboarders on Instagram than I do artists at this point.
Really?
Just because.
Now, what is it? Let me ask you, Anthony. What is it about? Because I grew up same way. Skateboarding was a big deal. Surfing was a big deal. For me personally, it was that counterculture kind of philosophy. Because at that time, like in the 80s and even coming into the 90s, it wasn't mainstreamed enough yet. Yeah. So it was, the kids who were kind of like, I want to do something different. I don't want to do the same crap as everybody else in school, kind of gravitated towards that. Or if you were a little bit more rebellious, you tended to kind of side towards those kinds of things. Was that part of the appeal to you? Was that outsider kind of feeling that you had?
I think I already felt like an outsider. And then, so it just seemed to naturally be a good place for me because it was so many outsiders. At the time, it's hard to explain to people now. There was no internet. Growing up in Missouri, you would see something on a skate video, and that skate video is already a year old. It took that long to get from California to Missouri. And then you hear music on it, and all you can do at that time is basically hold your stereo up to the TV and record that shit, because there's no way you're going to get that album. And then like 2 or 3 years later, that album might roll into town and everybody's dubbing it and passing it around and doing everything they can, because we didn't have access to anything. So like counterculture and subculture, that was a lot different back then. It's not like now. I mean, you can't just go into Bandcamp and listen to whatever the fuck you want whenever you want. And it was difficult, but it was also fun. It was like you really had to work for the stuff that you wanted.
Right. It was almost like discovering things. Like once you felt like you found it, like it was yours, you kind of owned it. Right?
Yeah. It was, I mean, I can get on Spotify right now and listen to millions of albums, but when I was a kid, it was like, here's the 5 albums for the year. Like, this is the hardest thing that I could do, to find these 5 albums, and you just listen to them nonstop, and all your friends listen to them, and everybody that listens to them. And but skateboarding in itself taught me like that there was a world outside of this world where I lived. In Missouri, it was like a bunch of rednecks and jocks, and I, like, growing up, I was in the suburbs of Missouri, and then when I was 15, I transferred to an inner city magnet school that was an arts magnet school. And it was like maybe 300 students when I joined, but it was a huge deal, like, to have an art school for high school students. And it was also a big change because I grew up in a really white suburb, and then I moved into the inner city, and I was the minority in my school. And that was kind of awesome. And it's kind of like why I like Albuquerque so much. I moved here from Austin, Texas, and something always just seems off, and you're like, yeah, it's just really white here. there's not enough like culture and diversity, and it doesn't feel like home because it doesn't exist.
Right. So now in high school, so you went to an art specific high school. Is that really where this whole idea of doing it professionally kind of takes off for you? Is that, you're immersed in it, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, well, like 7th grade, when I was still in the suburb, I knew art was my thing. It was like, I was just known. Like, that's how I made money. I like drew whatever popular album was at that time. I would draw album covers and sell them for like a couple of bucks to kids, and, skateboard graphics and whatever. I grew up dirt poor as it was. We were all on food stamps and like government issued monthly deals. And so if I wanted something, I had to work for it, even at that age.
Yeah.
So, art was definitely, I was like, I can do this and I can make money off of it, even if it was just like $5-10 a week. That was money I didn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then when I went to the inner city school, when I went to the magnet school, that was the first time I felt like I got real training. I mean, they didn't go into real detail about how techniques or anything like that, but it was like all the materials were there, all the resources were there, and everybody else there in that school was there for art. And it wasn't all for painting, it was also performance art and music. But like I was then fully immersed in this environment where everybody was pursuing creative venues, and that was a pretty big game changer for sure.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you also, Anthony, in this kind of environment, did you find personally it being more of a intimidation, being around so many other kids and very competitive, or were you inspired by it and kind of fanned the flames even more for you?
I knew I was good. I wasn't intimidated. I kind of thought I was the shit no matter what. It was just like, I felt like I probably intimidated other kids. Looking back at the shit I did in high school, I'm like, yeah, no. But at the time, it was like I was winning a lot of awards. I was getting in the Scholastics deals every year and winning stuff. So it didn't feel competitive to me. If anything, it felt like I was still trying to just find my place. It takes a long time to just find who you are as an artist. And at that point, you're just influenced by everything you see. So I was kind of all over the place at the time. Now, I went through a few dark phases.
in high school, does the skateboarding still have that wow factor and that influence for you? Are you still carrying that through even in the magnet school stuff? Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
were they ever trying to like, were the teachers ever trying to like, for lack of a better phrase, like beat that out of you, like the graphic stuff? And were they ever trying to discourage you and go traditional, or they just let you go at it?
Well, I didn't paint that so much. Like I painted when I look back at the stuff now that I painted, I still see similar threads to what I do now. It was like, even though I was a skateboarder, even though I was influenced by all this music and art, it didn't make me make that kind of art. It made me inspired to do whatever I wanted to do. And there were certain things, like I was friends with a couple of guys that were out of school, and we were working on like skateboard and music magazines, and another friend was starting a small skateboard company. And so like I worked on graphics that probably changed my style a bit to more to fit in with, like silk screening or processes that needed specific types of designs. But my teachers were really kind of hands off. They let me do whatever I wanted to do. And some of them didn't let me, and I just did it anyways. It was like I took a computer course, which, this is 1993. There was a Mac class, and I really thought computers were like art cheating. They were just bullshit. But I had to take the class, and that's what sparked a 20-year advertising career was me getting on a computer there, but she would make assignments and I would just like turn in whatever I wanted to do. I would just make weird shit and I would turn it in. She's just like, okay, it's not what I asked for, but you know.
You seem to know what you're doing, so we'll go with it.
You're learning something, so let's keep going.
Right. Yeah. So that leads you into advertising. Now, you had mentioned in the pre-check that you didn't go to college for art, correct? So what happens after high school? What's the next trajectory for you?
Well, in high school, I applied to colleges, and I got actually accepted and scholarships to SVA in New York and San Francisco Art Institute. But it wasn't a full ride, and I just didn't want to take any debt on whatsoever because my parents were out of the picture, and there was no money coming in anywhere else. So art kind of took a back seat for the most part. I mean, I moved in with some friends, and they were graffiti writers, and one of them did a local magazine called Flavor Pack that was kind of an arts and music magazine. And so we were all artists living there, and we were all kind of just doing our thing, but it was mainly sketchbooks. And I got in trouble when I was 17, and I was on probation for 5 years. So while I was very much interested in graffiti and that art scene, I was not taking any chances and going back to jail. So I just kind of absorbed everything that was going on from that scene, and I was never really in it. And then that next summer, I came out as gay. And that changed kind of everything for me. You know, when you bottle things up and you're closeted and you don't pursue this whole part of yourself for your entire life, and then suddenly you're free to do that, it just kind of took over. And I started working in a gay restaurant as a waiter and bartender. And this is not when I was 19, so I wasn't able to bartend yet, but I was still doing art in my own way. I was just like exploring my own things, but I kind of shifted away from all the friends that I had at that time. And, you know, I was dating around, and I met somebody and we moved in together, and it just kind of took over. So art kind of took a back seat for quite a while. It became more of like a hobby than anything. Because,
so when is that aha moment that brings it back for you?
When I was 30, so, you know, about 10 years later, I'd moved to LA when I was 21, and I just kind of knew that even though graphic design is not painting or art, it was at least creative and I could make money at it. And so this is like the .com days. And so I got this like really shitty job that worked like 80 hours a week for like $35,000 a year. And you get like every other Sunday off or something. Seriously, this is like not a joke. You got every other Sunday off. And that just like built my portfolio up huge in like a matter of months because I was working so much. And then I got an entertainment-based job working on movie websites just a few months after that, and everything just kept moving up, like one job to another from there. And I was a partner in 2 different design studios in Los Angeles. When I left one, I started another one with a friend, and that partner, business partner, he was getting married. And I wanted to give them a special gift for their wedding. So I was like, oh, I'll draw something. And so I ended up doing this painting, and that was like the start of painting again. It just started off as a gift, and it was fun. You know, it was really reflective of an illustration style that I had been exploring for years digitally. So it didn't seem that far out of the realm of what I was doing.
That's a great story.
It is. I was just going to say, MK, it's a great, and it's specifically great for our kids to hear, because so many of them do lose touch with some of the creative parts of who they are, because either the parents are like, no, you got to get a quote unquote real job, or you have to go to school for something more academic, or they may be athletic and their ride or their way in is through sports, and everything kind of puts, we've had quite a few of those kids over the past few years who are literally torn between, like I've had kids even this past year who come to me and they say, Sena, I don't know if I should take the scholarship for lacrosse, or if I'm getting the scholarship for fine art too. And my parents don't know which one. What do you think I should, I'm not going to be able to do both. How am I going to be able to figure this out? And to hear you say that, Anthony, that you can always essentially come back to whatever it is you love to do the most and still find a path through that, I think is such a huge message for our kids. And we had talked about it on the pre-check too. We have so many kids from all different environments, but especially from the LGBTQ community, who find themselves and find comfort in the art room and really find that it's their family for 4 years and they really feel accepted.
Especially more these last couple of years.
Right. I think it's so important that you, as a openly gay man, know the importance of how being creative has being creative helped you find more of who you are inside. Would you equate any of that together?
It's complicated because it's like I for the longest time I always wanted to separate that. Like I didn't, for one, now I identify as non-binary. I don't identify as a gay man, and it's like it's not a big deal to me. I don't really care about pronouns or what anybody calls me. It's just how I feel. Right. But ultimately, for a long time, I always associated like gay art or LGBTQ plus art as something that had to be tied to like something sexual. Like it had to, like it had to have some like, explicit quality, or it had to be shockingly gay in some way. And I didn't really like kind of being defined that way. I wanted it to just be like, I'm just an artist and I happen to be gay. But since this administration took over, it felt like way more important that I be more visible in what I do, and that I make that association known more, that, you know, I am a non-binary artist. Like I am somebody who, like, I don't have to worry. I just gave up on the idea that I had to worry about that other component that made me shy away from it before. But I don't feel like they were that connected.
Right. Interesting. It's fascinating. MK, can we start pulling up some of Anthony's work? Because I find, Anthony, I find your work fascinating on so many levels. And having followed you and how active you are on social media and showing your work and explaining the work, I'm fascinated particularly with these surrealist type of approaches to these portraits that you've been doing. They're absolutely beautiful. They are just so vibrant and loud and gorgeous, and the palette is just so expressive. Can you just, I always think that it's for me, it feels like there's a connection with searching for identity. Can you explain to us what's behind these type of portraits that you've been working on?
It's less about searching for identity than like explaining identity, because we are these multifaceted creatures. We have all these layers and depth and things that we don't know for ourselves. Like I'm 45 years old and I'm still learning new things about myself all the time. And, the pandemic alone has like really forced everybody to be introspective and look at themselves in new ways. But when it came to those portraits, for about 4 or 5 years, I'd been occasionally doing these portrait studies on the side. I didn't really know how to translate where I was into where I wanted to be artistically, because I'd been doing these landscapes. And the landscapes were really important to me at the time, because I was, I got out of an 18-year relationship about 5.5 years ago, and it just like destroyed me. And the only way I knew how to express what I was going through was through these landscapes. And again, after this administration took over, I did a few studies literally the day after Trump was elected, because my friends, especially my Black and Indigenous friends, were destroyed, and the LGBTQ community was a mess. And so I started doing these portraits, and I was calling them like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it was like an expression of what was going on with my friends around me. Right. But back in January is when I really started doing these portraits. I did a hypnosis session with a local guy here, and we dug up some weird old things from my childhood. And there was this experience that I had multiple times where I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would look over and I would think that I see this like kind of tribal indigenous mask like staring at me, watching me sleep. And when I look at it, it would like dart under my bed or disappear and all this stuff. And growing up in a hyper-religious Midwestern town, my mom told me it was Satan and it was the devil, and I needed to like pray this shit away. And, so I was like having weird mystical experiences as a kid. And even as an adult, I was blocking this shit out because it was ingrained in me that it was wrong. Right. It was bad. And after this hypnosis session, I didn't feel that anymore. I didn't like it. Kind of wiped the slate of the fear that I had been carrying on that for a long time.
Was that the point of the session?
It wasn't the initial point of it, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so, but after that, I was like, well, I'm gonna kind of paint my version of that mask. And it wasn't trying to replicate what I saw. It was more of a mood. And this time I was just doing it digitally. I was just like, messing around digitally in Procreate. And I started doing that every day for maybe like 3 or 4 weeks and just exploring it. And it just continued to build, and it turned more into, when I started translating it into painting, it started to feel more like exploring the depths of people. Right. Even a person who seems dense and doesn't seem as though they have much depth to them, whether or not they know it or not, it exists. Right. We all have experiences. We all have things that we've gone through, whether or not we have digested it or processed it or come to terms with it. It doesn't matter. Those layers still exist. Like, right. You never know what somebody has gone through. And that's a lot of what I want to explore in those portraits, is just to look at people and understand that there's a lot more going on than what you see in the surface. You're not just the pretty face or an ugly face or whatever.
Right. I think it's so interesting though, Anthony, that you've learned to embrace what initially you thought was a negative in your life, and through art have been able to turn it around into an absolute positive. Was that consciously in your head when you were thinking about this series, was to kind of purge yourself from the negative experience, or it just kind of happened?
No, it just kind of happened. Part of what I went in there for to do the hypnosis was because I just kind of felt stuck. I didn't like what I was doing anymore. And I just wanted to get through that feeling of being stuck. And when I left there, I was like, whatever, I still feel the same. And now I've had a couple sessions since then, and I've kind of realized, like, it's not like hypnosis, snap, everything's all better. It's more like this subtle, gradual coming to of this internal change. And so I didn't really associate the two of them initially. And then a few weeks into it, I was like, I just felt lighter, and I felt like I was doing what I wanted to do. I think I had this feeling for a few years now that I wasn't doing the art that I wanted to do. I was doing the art that people wanted me to do.
Right.
And that's a horrible feeling, you know, to just be like trapped in a genre, or it was not somewhere I wanted to be. And I just wanted out of that. So that was my only motivation.
Yeah. I think that just the connection between the art that you're making and your history, it's fascinating to see you using the art regardless of you know, whatever has happened. It still seems to me like it's such an important part of who you are as a human being, and you embrace that so openly and so honestly. And it's very admirable that you have that quality, that you're so self-reflective about what it is you're doing, even if it's just to get that energy out or to feel like you have to do something different. And we've noticed in your work how you don't stay the same. You're constantly changing. You're constantly evolving. Is that a conscious effort on your part to always be evolving, or does it kind of hit you at different times?
I get stuck easy, and I realize that like my happy place is experimenting. Right. Like that is where I feel the best, is when I, you know, because a lot of the pieces, even some of the older landscapes that it's not that I dislike what I did, I just didn't feel great about where I was going anymore. But the process of all of my paintings that I enjoy the most is the beginning, because I don't plan. I just like lay down color and experiment and see where it goes and see what I like and what I don't like. I mean, when I felt a little stuck a few years ago and I was still planning on doing landscapes, but I wanted to do something different, I just would put this giant canvas up on the wall and just smear paint all over the place with my hands and my forearms and everything that I could possibly use to just move paint around. I did that, and it makes me feel better. And a lot of times it looked like shit. There was nothing. It wasn't like magic was happening or anything. Right. There was no like beautiful form that was coming from this. It was not a great visual experience, but like physically it felt really great. And so a lot of times I would completely paint over that. Like that's underneath the painting that you see is a whole nother experience, but it like gets it out of the system. And then like that specific canvas, I think is like 5 by 7 feet or something like that. Wow. I think there's maybe 3 by 3 inches of that painting that resembles the base layer of that all in the finished piece.
That's awesome. I mean, it's that physicality too, that it does come across in your pieces when you're looking at them, even small on a phone, you know, on Instagram or on social media. Like they have such a presence. On average, what size scale are you usually working to? Like, what are those pieces size wise?
The smaller pieces are all like 8 by 10s or 12 by 12s. A lot of the shows that I do, like group shows that I do with ThinkSpace, it's pretty formatted where everybody does 12 by 12 inch pieces. Mm-hmm. When I work on larger pieces, it's usually 3 by 5 feet, like range. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a preference size wise? Like, do you prefer, like, is it more enjoyable?
No, I need both. Yeah. I really need both. Like the big pieces take a lot longer. And since it is so experimental, I find that I learn a lot of things through the smaller pieces that I'm doing in the interim of the large pieces. Right. So a lot of that, they bounce off of each other. Yeah. And it's like that in itself is a part of my process.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
I have those smaller experiments to work with.
Yeah, like I was just going to say that it's interesting how these quote unquote mock-ups on smaller scale are actually full pieces for you at the same time. Like you're constantly learning process by evolving through what you're doing and then taking it to another level. I think that's MK for our students to understand, and I think that's also that's a key component, especially for the upper level kids like the AP and the portfolio. Because we talk a lot about, we talk a lot about process and you know?
Absolutely. And also just like, and we talk about enjoying the process too. It's like the way that you said, like the beginning part of the painting is like your favorite part. I mean, our kids are so obsessed in the end with the end result, what, planning out what it's going to look like in the end. And then, really judging the whole piece by the end result and not, thinking about how they were when they were making the piece and what it means to make the piece. And that's something like, I think as teachers, especially like, earlier in my career, at least, I think I was more focused on getting the students to produce, what we would consider more quality work in the end, and, thinking about that end result more. But in these last couple of years, I think it's important that they enjoy the process, and that they recognize that the art making process is more important than the end result. Because ultimately, whether they go on to art or not, what's going to draw them back years later into the art is whether or not they enjoyed the art making process, So,
yeah, I mean, you might not need a career in it to it be an important part of your life. Like, I always get people messaging me saying things like, I love painting, but I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
I'm like, why does that fucking matter?
We hear that all the time.
You love painting, so you should be painting. Like, that's what matters.
Yeah.
I like the process of painting, and we just moved to New Mexico a year ago, and we have these has the old clotheslines in the backyard. Doesn't have the lines, it just has the poles. Right. And so I'm like going to build a box that fits over one of the poles, so I can just paint this box in the backyard whenever I want. Because the process of painting is so enjoyable. Yeah. Like, because we're all different. I have friends that do hyper realism and things, and they will draw the same thing like 100 times before they actually paint it and make sure it's perfect and all that stuff. And I have no idea if they actually enjoy it, but that would kill me to have to go through that. But for me, part of my process is like to never say it has to be this way. Like, there's a lot of times when I get to where it could be finished and something's just not right for me. Like, I just don't like something. I can paint over half of it. Yeah. I can make a major move at the very end and completely change the tone of a piece just because that's what it needed.
Yeah, and not panic about it, and not.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that comes a lot of times. I think that comes with obviously experience too. But for like our students at the high school level, like there's no matter what, there's always a sense of panic. Like I like how you said that, like not to panic about it. Like, it may be the end result. You may be 3/4 into the piece, and you could do something that could either make it really much better, or you could do something that could make it much worse, but you're not going to know unless you try it.
I think part of the problem too is that they're not always, at least with us they are, we know for a fact that they are, but in many programs they're not encouraged to take risks. I think that they want to play it safe. A lot of teachers want them to play it safe, especially when they're at like an AP level and they're trying to get a score on a certain portfolio piece, or I think the kids come in with a preconceived notion of what it should look like, in quotes, and just because it should look like that doesn't mean that the end result has to look like that to be a good piece. And I think they get so caught up in that, and a lot of it is maturity level and experience and having to go through that. But I think that's where the biggest problem for us as teachers is encouraging them to take risk without panic and not worrying about it. And I think, Anthony, for you to say that, as successful as you are, that you are fine with taking that risk. And if I don't like this, screw it. I'm going to paint over this part. And if it works when I redo it, it works. And if it doesn't, I move on to something else.
No risk, no reward.
Right. No risk, no reward. Is that kind of how you go through every piece?
That's kind of how I go through everything. Yeah. Not just art. I mean, you have to take chances. Like, I've moved. I've lived in a lot of different places now. I've tried a lot of different things. I've had different careers. Life is really boring if you don't take some chances.
Right.
you know, and maybe that's just me. I don't know. That's one thing. As I get older, I just realize the less I know. You know, like everything you think.
I think we all do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything you think is solid as a kid is not solid when you're.
And then 10 years from now, you'd be saying about the way that you are right now. It's like,
yeah. It's not. It's just things.
It's life.
Really,
it's learning process. It's, you know.
Yeah, it's not that important. You know, when it comes to my art, even. Yeah, I want people to collect it. It would be great if someone cared about my art, you know, 100 years after I was dead. But the reality is, most people, even if they buy your shit, most of us aren't going to make it in the history books.
Right.
Yeah. You're drawing in high school, it ain't going to make it in the history books.
Right.
Like,
right.
it doesn't matter. Like, what matters more? How you feel? And you experiencing life and enjoying it in a way that is beneficial to you and your future, or in the people around you, or obsessing and, you know, making yourself miserable over a painting that, you know, you're not even going to like when you're done with it because you hated the process.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's great. It's interesting to hear. It's like, make the work that you want to make now, because why do you care how people are going to feel about it when you're gone, basically?
Yeah. Right. I mean, I throw stuff away if I don't like it.
Yeah.
You know, I've had people like cringe when they hear that, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. You know, I know artists that are really successful that they have tons of work you are never going to see, ever. It will never be in their book. It will never be in their process. You will never see what they go through. We all throw shit away. You know, it's not all that important. I think in this day and age where we're all like a brand and have to manage your social media and, you know, be marketing directors and artists and photographers and everything all at the same time, we're more aware of how much control we have of what we put out than ever before. You know, it's a different world. I can't imagine what it's going to be in 15 years, 20 years. You know.
I'm lucky if I can imagine tomorrow, to be honest. With the way things have been going for the past 6 months, I mean, tomorrow is just like, that's as far as I can look.
Yeah. That's not a bad thing, though.
It's not.
No,
it's really not.
Funny.
It's not.
I was talking about this similar thing in a written interview because they were talking about the future, and they were also asking about the pandemic, and I'm like, spiritual modalities and religion and all these things have for generations been telling us to like be in the now and not worry about tomorrow and be present, and it was like, and it took a global pandemic for that to happen for people. Like it took literally cutting off the rest of the world from everybody in order for people to sit in their own stuff and be introspective and just realize that they have no control over what's going on in the world. And don't get me wrong, I'm on medication for depression and anxiety, and I have OCD tendencies like you wouldn't believe, and I have had panic attacks and all those things that you can possibly imagine. So I'm not speaking on this as someone who thinks like people are crazy for experiencing it. I'm just sharing my personal experience.
Right. No, but I think I was just going to ask you, Anthony, like in light of you being so self-aware and being so introspective about what you're doing, has this pandemic brought those qualities out of you even more? Has it changed you in any way in regards to how you create things? Do you see it changing how you create in the future? Has it affected you anyway that way?
It's just like, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have no idea. You know, 6 months from now, I might be able to look back at that question and say, yes, this happened. Like I might be able to make a correlation about what happened in my past, much easier than I can predict what will happen in my future. I mean, it's definitely made me more aware of little things, like, you know, going out to restaurants and social events, and just like we talked about yesterday a little bit. It was like I don't want to go back to normal. I don't want to go back to the fast pace of life prior to COVID, because it's really highlighted how much our lives are just ruled by capitalism. The need for stuff, and and as I say that, I sit here with my iPad and my phone and all my electronics and all the shit that I have and my art supplies. And yes, I have an Amazon Prime account, even though I hate the owner. But yes.
But you need stuff the next day, right?
Yeah, but sometimes I need stuff fast. But yeah, it's highlighted a lot of things in life that I didn't.
Yeah, I think
I knew existed, but I didn't have to look at it because the pace of life was so fast. We didn't have to slow down and look at it.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that the pace of life now that as things would go back to normal. Hopefully the pace doesn't go faster to try to make up for missed time. And I hope people feel the way that you feel. Like even for us, I think especially with like kids, like young kids, they the weeks are just like packed with stuff like nonstop every single day. And then like when all this happened and everything like just shut down and you're at home, you're like, you know what? At first it was like kind of weird, but then you're like, it's nice not having to run all these places. And in the end,
I think it's going to be interesting
until you want some time for yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
you can't go play with her friends next door.
But it brings up a good point, okay, because in the news just today we just found out that at least where we are in our area here in Nassau County on Long Island, they have canceled all after school sport events from now until January.
Yeah.
So all of the kids who are always so highly structured and scheduled with practices and games, and now they have all of this time, and they are talking about not letting kids hang around after school, like getting them out of the building and moving them around. And so it's going to be interesting to see with all of this freer time and a lack of this hyper scheduled after school kind of mentality, what comes of this. And
I think the
kids will embrace the creative parts more because they'll have more time for that.
I think they'll just supplement it. I mean, I think I agree with some things with the school with canceling the athletics, but then I'm like, in the end, they're still doing it on this, like same thing with like everything that's happening with school right now. Like, like we're meeting with half the amount of kids every other day, and then we have kids online and blah, 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 blah. But, in the end, you're still going to go home. You're going to drive home. You're going to see like 15 kids with no masks walking home and hanging out during lunch. It's the same thing with the sports. Like, all right, the schools canceled sports, but I know that they all playing on their club teams. I mean, even myself, I played softball during the summer on the weekends. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I agree with some parts of it, then I don't agree with some parts. So it's tricky.
If they told me not to skateboard with my friends, okay.
You'd still be out there, yeah.
Like as a teenager.
Yeah. I know when we go out for lunch, Tom, or we go to like get coffee or something, you're gonna see all these kids that were in the school. They're gonna be out. Sure. They're gonna be out,
For sure.
But I guess the school needs to protect themselves.
I think that it's going to be interesting though, like to segue from a highly structured afternoon where everything is like we got to be here by 3:30, and then we have dance at 5, and then we have to eat between dance and gymnastics, and like without that hyper schedule, I'm hoping that things will kind of like calm down a little bit.
I think, I already see it. It's already starting to go back to that, but I also feel like, hopefully it'll just get us to like kind of just rethink, like, do we need all that stuff? You know what I mean? Like, is it absolutely a necessity, or, and don't put pressure on yourself to like, it's okay to like miss something or to, I don't know.
Anthony, the other thing I was going to ask you that I really wanted to touch base on is, we've had kids who have reached out to us and said that, throughout all of this, with all the anxiety and all of the concern and all of the, whatnots and unknowns, that they have felt paralyzed in their ability to be creative and to sustain any kind of creative lifestyle. How has it affected you either way? Have you felt with the time that you can be creative, or has it stifled you in any way? How has this whole past 6 months experience affected you as a creative?
It hasn't affected me much. I mean, part of it was like I had a show coming up anyways. Like it was coming whether or not there was a pandemic or not. So I had a goal that had to be met. You know, I had to finish this work. But it hasn't, I don't know. Some of it's changed. Like I look at creativity differently. It's not just like a physical product. Like cooking is creative, yard work is creative, doing stuff with, you know, with the family is creative. There's a lot of things that are creative.
Yeah.
And I usually, and I think just having been a working artist for some time now, like I am used to having to find new ways to be creative. If I do feel a little blocked painting, like I don't feel like I have to paint every day. I like to paint every day, but some days I need to do something else. So whether or not that's go home and like bake some gluten-free banana nut bread and make a meal for the family or do some work in the backyard, like there are other ways to be creative. So, you know, kind of go back a little bit to the skateboarding conversation. It's like, I can't skate very much because when I fall, I don't bounce anymore.
we all don't. You just pick up the rest of the pieces.
Some of us just lay there forever afterwards.
But
sitting in this chair, I lay here forever afterwards.
Yeah, it was like I remember when I was a kid. In the summertime, I would get up every day and I would watch like my favorite skate video was at that time. I would watch it every single morning to get me hyped up to go outside and skate. And Instagram's kind of like that for me in the morning. Like I get online, I watch a bunch of skateboard because skateboarding's really, it's crazy creative. Like you have to come up with all kinds of solutions for skateboarding. So I still get like hyped up on skateboarding and then go paint, you know. I think maybe it's just important for them to know that creativity isn't necessarily always painting or creating.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And that they need to maybe like pursue other creative things in the interim and then come back to painting.
Yeah.
I like that. And I also think like thinking about like anything that you do, putting your creativity into anything that you do. You know?
Right. Well, I think that goes back to MK, to our NAHS, the National Art Honor Society's theme of
absolutely,
be a creative. You know, we always tell the kids, be a creative, not be creative, be a creative. So it doesn't matter
like
what
approach
it is you do.
Everything with that creative mindset.
Right. Have that mindset that, you know, if it doesn't matter if you're, you know, like you said, if you're skateboarding, be creative when you're skateboarding. If you're, you know, cooking, be creative when you're cooking. Like just to have that necessary outlet. I think for all of us, if that part of us wasn't there, we would have such an empty area.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I think it's important too to think that way too, because then it does take the pressure off of you to, you know, force yourself to feel productive. Like you said, you don't paint every single day. You know, a lot of times, like, you know, students and myself, like if you don't, like you almost put yourself down. But if you explore creativity in other ways, then it almost, you know, it kind of relieves you of that burden of forcing yourself to do a painting every day, you know, I guess.
Well, but you gotta rest.
Yeah.
You know, like your mind can't be on 24/7 every day. You can't just be completely, like you are gonna burn out if you think that you are full-time in the game of painting or drawing or whatever. You know, and like going back to the exploration conversation, you know, sometimes I just open up my iPad and I make like a puzzle for myself. I just scribble shit and I make colors and things, and then my creativity is like, well, what do I see in that? What colors do I like? How can I keep building on this? And sometimes it's nothing. I think the part of the conversation we had yesterday that I do find important is like skateboarding taught me that like you have to fall hundreds of times before you learn a trick. Like there is no one who just jumps on a board and does something. And art is the same way. Everything's the same way. Like when I'm talking about cook, like I tried to, like I'm not a cook that's good at following recipes. Like I very much wing it and I know what I like and what I don't. And I've been trying to bake more lately, and apparently that requires a little bit more
a little bit more precision
precision than I'm used to. So I like kind of faked my way through a like berry bread type thing last week, and it came out absolutely horrible. It was like this thick, dense blob of dough with berries stuck in it. And you know what? I still had fun making it. Right. You know, I could eat the edges of it. I just couldn't eat the inside. But like, you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Everyone makes mistakes, and like, that's part of the process.
That's another great message, MK, that our kids need to hear, that it's okay to make that mistake and learn from it and be okay with it and embrace it and say, okay, well then I'm going to try this the next time. I always like to say that I learn personally in my own work, I learn more from the stuff that I don't do well, or that challenges me more, or things that I struggle with, like trying to figure things out. Like I take so much more away from that, because once it becomes less of a challenge, there's no stimulation for me mentally to keep doing it.
You just do it.
Anthony, I feel like you kind of feel that same way. Like if it's not stimulating your head and your brain and your mind to keep going, you kind of lose interest in that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I would almost separate it from creativity and call it like a science, you know, where you're trying to, or it's a equation, something you have to figure out. I enjoy figuring it out. I enjoy like making it into something. Like when I paint, it's hard to explain to people that, like, they'll see all these broad strokes and they think like, you know, I was just able to take a palette knife and make these amazing strokes. That's not how it works. Like, that's the base layer, and then I make it into what I want. Like I build in all these fine details, and I build shadows in, and I push it and I pull it, and I like force it to be what I want it to be. And that's the part that I like figuring it out and making that happen. It's without that part. That's why I couldn't be one of those artists that does just hyper realistic work, because if I had a totally clear vision of what it was going to be before I even started, I'd be like, why?
Yeah, what's the point?
I already figured it out. Like, why produce it? So I have a ton of respect for people who do that kind of work, but I just don't understand it. It's just not the way my brain works. And that's something I talk about a lot too, is that every single one of our paths is different. It's like when we were talking earlier about me taking like a 10 or 11 year break before I got back into painting. Yes, you can start. What do you think retirement is? Like, people start painting again when they're 65 or 70 years old. Yes, where do you think all of these beach scenes come from? They come from retirement. Like, you can always come back to art. It's never too late for that.
MK, we are well over an hour again.
I know.
It's just been incredible what we get to hear from so many creative people who are so willing to share how they feel about what they do, why they love what they do. Anthony, you have been so approachable this whole time since we reached out to you a couple of weeks ago about doing it. You were so inviting to do it, and just so willing and accepting what we wanted to get out of it. I hope it's been a great experience for you to be able to talk to our kids and fellow art educators who are going to be watching. I think the messages that you have are so very important for so many kids to hear, because it's in touch with how they feel about a lot of what's going on. I think to know that somebody embraces that and accepts that and still continues to move on and get through life, I think is just a great example for them. I think you set a wonderful example for them in terms of just keep doing what you're doing, and don't worry about the consequences. If you feel in your heart that it's the right thing and you're doing it to the best that you can, and like you said, shit's gonna happen, and how you deal with it is gonna make more of a difference than anything else. So We are approaching the end of the summer. So as we come back to school, I just want to say, everybody, please follow along with the guidelines. Let's stay safe, and let's see if we can get through this without anybody, anything negative happening. It's going to be a challenge, but I think we're up for it. As long as we all pull with each other, I think the wagon can move if everybody's moving in the same direction.
Good luck with that.
I think at this point, MK, I think we have to think that way. If we're going to get through everything, we got to stay positive about it.
I know. I got to.
So like we say every episode, keep looking out for one another, keep caring for one another, keep loving one another. We got to be able to pull through this at some point, and just hopefully we can all have a reunion episode like a year from now, and just everybody be laughing about it and be like, can you believe that such and such happened, like blah, 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 and just smile about it. Hopefully that happens. But until then, everybody, thanks so much for joining in. Anthony Hurd, again, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much.
We will be staying in touch with you and following your career as it progresses, and love to see how you evolve. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.